I always thought if my marriage ended, it would be because he cheated or because we grew apart, like those couples you hear about who wake up one day and realize they have nothing in common anymore. But no, I ended my marriage with a single sentence. I'm Camille, I'm 31, and I destroyed my entire life because I couldn't keep my mouth shut. Zach and I met in college. He wasn't the guy every girl was chasing. He was quiet, a little awkward, but kind. The kind of guy who remembered your coffee order and always had an extra pen in case you forgot yours. While my friends dated loud, overconfident frat guys who treated them like accessories, Zach was steady, dependable. He made me feel safe. And after years of watching my parents' disaster of a marriage, safety seemed like the most important thing in the world. We got married at 25, bought a house at 27, settled into a life that was comfortable. And then somewhere along the way, comfortable turned into something else. It turned into Zach coming home exhausted every night, too drained from work to talk about anything besides bills or grocery lists. It turned into the same Friday night takeout order, the same movie nights on the couch, the same half-hearted kisses that felt more like habit than passion. It turned into me standing in front of the mirror every morning, sucking in my stomach and wondering if I'd wasted my best years on a love that wasn't exciting, wasn't thrilling, wasn't enough. I told myself it was normal, that this was what long-term relationships were supposed to be, that real love wasn't about butterflies, it was about stability. But I still noticed. I noticed the way my coworker, Nate, leaned in when he laughed at my jokes. How he remembered little things Zach never seemed to anymore. What book I was reading, how I liked my tea. I noticed how easy it was to talk to him, how my heart raced just a little when he messaged me some dumb meme in the middle of the day. I noticed how, when I stood next to Zach, I felt nothing. The resentment started creeping in like a slow poison. Every time he forgot to take out the trash, every time he scrolled through his phone while I was talking, every time he fell asleep before touching me, it all became proof that something was wrong, that he wasn't trying, that I deserved more. And then came the night I ruined everything. We were at dinner with his family, his mom, his sister, his brother-in-law, the usual Sunday night gathering. The conversation was light, easy, flowing the way it always did, until his mom, bless her heart, decided to go on a little nostalgic trip down memory lane. You know, Camilla, when Zach was in high school, he had so many admirers, she said with a fond smile. All the girls thought he was the cutest thing. Such a heartbreaker, my Zachary. I laughed, automatic and polite. But something about the way she said it, the way she looked at me like I should be grateful to have him, rubbed me raw. And then she said the words that pushed me over the edge. You're so lucky to have a man like him. Lucky. Lucky to have a husband who barely looked at me anymore. Lucky to have a life that felt like a waiting room, bland and endless. Lucky to have settled before I even knew what I really wanted. I should have just smiled. I should have let it go. But the words were out before I could stop them. I don't feel lucky. Silence. Zach's fork stopped midair. His sister's eyes flicked between us, wide and stunned. His mother gave a nervous little chuckle. Oh, honey, you don't mean that. I could have backpedaled. I could have laughed it off, blamed it on the wine, made some joke about work stress. Instead, I did what I always do when I feel cornered. I doubled down. No, really, I said, swirling my wine glass. I don't feel lucky. I feel bored. The second it was out of my mouth, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Zach's face went blank. Not angry, not hurt, just empty. His mom looked horrified. His sister looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. The rest of dinner was excruciating. Zach barely spoke. His mother tried to force normal conversation, but the tension was unbearable. I ate 2 bites of my food and excused myself to the bathroom, gripping the sink and staring at my reflection, my pulse hammering. What had I done? By the time we got home, the silence had stretched between us like a canyon. Zach walked into the bedroom, changed into sweatpants, and sat on the edge of the bed, his back to me. I hovered in the doorway, suddenly unsure of what to say. Zach, I started. He didn't look at me. Are you bored, Camille? His voice was low, steady, but I could hear the anger underneath. I swallowed. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. I sucked in a breath, scrambling for damage control. Zach, I feel like we've fallen into this routine and maybe we both need to put in more effort. More effort? He laughed. short and humorless. You mean like the effort I put into working 10-hour days so we can have this house? Or the effort I put into making sure we have savings so you don't have to stress about money? Or do you mean effort like the little things I do that you don't even notice anymore? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Zach exhaled hard and stood up. I can't do this right now. And then he left the room. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, my stomach twisting, my mind racing through every possible way to fix what I'd broken. But deep down, I already knew. I had just lit the match, and it was only a matter of time before the whole thing burned to the ground. Zach didn't come home that night. Or the next. By Friday, the silence had stretched so long it started to feel like a living thing, curling around me, pressing against my chest with every passing hour. The house felt empty in a way that wasn't just physical. It was the kind of absence that burrowed into the walls, clung to the air, made even the sound of my own footsteps feel intrusive. I tried to pretend I wasn't waiting, that the space he left behind wasn't something I kept glancing at like a missing piece of furniture, but it was impossible. Every quiet moment felt too loud. Every untouched plate in the sink, every unmade side of the bed was a reminder that something had shifted, something real, something irreversible. By noon, my resolve cracked. I picked up my phone, my fingers hesitating over the screen. What could I even say? Are we really doing this? Are we just going to keep avoiding each other? The message hovered there, waiting to be sent. I erased it, rewrote it, then finally, without thinking too hard, pressed send. He read it immediately. Minutes passed. Long, stretching, suffocating minutes. Then finally a response. You made it clear how you feel. I exhaled slowly, my stomach nodding at the blunt finality of it. No anger, no accusations, just a simple, undeniable fact. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. That's not fair. But was it? I had been the one who threw the first punch, hadn't I? I pictured him at Dave's, nursing a beer, recounting the whole disaster to his brother. Would Dave tell him to leave? Tell him I wasn't worth the effort? Another message came through before I could think too much about it. I'm just giving you space to enjoy your freedom. Freedom. The word landed like an insult. It made it sound like I had been suffocating, like he was doing me a favor by stepping aside. I imagined Zach living somewhere else, sleeping in a different bed, laughing at some joke I'd never hear. The idea made my throat tighten. I swallowed hard, inhaled deeply, and typed one last thing. Can we at least talk? Face to face? The response came quick. Too quick. Not yet! I stared at the words, gripping my phone like it could somehow change the reality of the situation. Not yet. Not never. But maybe that was worse, because it meant he was still deciding whether I was even worth talking to at all. The days stretched on, slow and punishing. Zach was still gone, not physically. His things were still in the closet, his keys still on the hook, his favorite mug still sitting in the drying rack like he'd just washed it yesterday. But emotionally, mentally, he had checked out. I still caught myself listening for the sound of the front door, for the heavy tread of his boots against the hardwood floor. But the house stayed silent. I wasn't sure what I'd expected when I sent that message. Maybe some sign that he wasn't as distant as he seemed. Maybe an argument even, because anger meant feeling something. Instead, I got a polite, emotionless not yet, and that somehow felt worse than rage. I kept waiting for him to give in, to break the silence first, but days passed, and Zach never did. I hated how that felt, because if he wasn't going to fight for this, for us, then what did that mean? That he had already made his choice? By Wednesday, I started wondering if I should be the one to go looking for him. I knew he was at Dave's. I could picture it perfectly. Their shitty old couch, the half-empty beer bottles on the table, the dim glow of the TV in the background while Zach sat there, arms crossed, jaw tight. But what would I even say if I showed up? I didn't mean it, except I had. Not the way it came out, maybe, but the feeling behind it. The years of quiet, unspoken resentment, that had been real. And now it was out there, no way to take it back. I tried to tell myself I was fine. That maybe Zach needing space was a good thing. Maybe it would give me time to process everything, to figure out what I wanted, but the house had never felt so empty. I hadn't noticed before how much of it was filled with him. The scent of his aftershave lingering in the bathroom, the way his boots were always haphazardly kicked off by the door, the way he always left the bedroom window cracked, even when it was too cold because he liked the fresh air. I caught myself reaching for my phone more times than I could count, then I'd stop. Because what would I even say? So instead, I distracted myself the best way I knew how. I went out. Friday night, I found myself sitting in a booth at a bar downtown, sandwiched between two of my coworkers, pretending to laugh at something that wasn't funny. Jason sat across from me, flashing his usual easy smile. He was the kind of guy who thrived on attention, on knowing he was charming. And before, I would have let myself enjoy it just a little. But now it felt hollow. "Another round?" Jason asked, already signaling to the waitress. I hesitated. My glass was still half full. But what the hell else was I supposed to do? Go home and sit in the silence, waiting for Zach to make the first move. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. The drinks kept coming, and the noise of the bar blurred around me. Someone slid into the seat next to me, Jason probably, though I wasn't paying much attention. "You okay?" His voice was lower now, closer. I blinked at him. "Yeah, fine." "You don't seem fine." I opened my mouth, ready to brush it off. But the words didn't come. Instead, I thought about how different Zach had been when we first met, how he leaned against his truck that first night, grinning like he already knew I was trouble, how he used to pull me against him at parties, keeping his hand on the small of my back, his presence a silent, grounding force. I thought about how he used to look at me, and how he didn't anymore. Jason was watching me too closely now, and I knew what he was thinking. I saw the shift. The way his confidence grew when I didn't immediately move away. For a second, I considered letting it happen. I could do it. I could lean in, let Jason's hand skim my thigh, tilt my head at just the right angle. And Zach would never have to know. The thought made my stomach turn. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my glass. Jason raised an eyebrow. "Leaving already?" "I shouldn't have come," I muttered, reaching for my coat. He exhaled, shaking his head. "Layla, come on, it's just a drink." It was just a drink, but it was also more than that, because the second I'd even considered it, really considered it, my brain had immediately supplied an image of Zach. Not angry, not jealous, just done, and that was what made my breath catch in my throat, because the truth was, I didn't want him to be done. I wanted to fix this, even if I didn't know how. By the time I got home, my buzz had faded, leaving behind nothing but exhaustion. I kicked off my shoes, rubbing my temples, willing the headache away. Then I saw it. Zach's jacket, hanging on the back of the kitchen chair. My heart lurched. I barely had time to process it before I heard movement down the hall, the quiet creak of a door, footsteps against the hardwood. And then, there he was, standing in the doorway, watching me. His eyes swept over me, taking in the heels, the makeup, the scent of too many overpriced cocktails still clinging to my skin. Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment. It hit me harder than I expected. "You're back," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he just nodded once, turned away, and disappeared down the hall. And just like that, I knew. Space hadn't made this better. It had only made it worse. I barely slept that night. Zach was home, but not really. His presence was a shadow, something I could feel more than see. I lay awake listening for movement, but the house stayed quiet. He hadn't come to bed. I didn't know if he was on the couch or if he was even sleeping at all. Morning came too soon. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, and I hesitated before pulling myself out of bed. I wasn't ready for this conversation, but I didn't have a choice. When I stepped into the kitchen, Zach was already there, leaning against the counter, a mug in his hand. For a second, I just looked at him. At the sharp line of his jaw, the set of his shoulders. He looked different, not in a dramatic way, just tired, like something had settled in him during the past few days, something I wasn't sure I liked. His eyes met mine. "Morning," I said, my voice hesitant. Zach just took a slow sip of coffee. "Morning." That was it. No warmth, no anger, just nothing. I swallowed hard. "You came back." Guess I did. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I gripped the counter. "Are we going to talk about it?" Zach exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. "I don't know, Layla. Are we?" I faltered. "I didn't mean to say it like that. Not in front of your mom." His laugh was humorless. But you still meant it. My stomach twisted.
I couldn't deny it. Not completely.
Zach shook his head. You've been feeling this way for how long? Months? Years? I stayed silent. He let out a slow breath, nodding to himself. That's what I thought. I never stopped loving you, I blurted. His jaw tightened. That's not the point, he said, voice steady. Too steady. You think love makes up for respect? That's not fair. Isn't it? I gritted my teeth.